right here, right now. We are, of course, concluding the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And of course, we are also commemorating the Human Rights Day. What a day. My name is Anki Doris Umbat. On behalf of KTN, just appreciating your viewership and your engagement on social media and also on our platforms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I already gave you the opening remarks, but it's very important that we acknowledge the partners who have made this happen right here at the Kenya Medical Training Center, KMTC in Nairobi. KTN, of course, UNESCO, University of Nairobi, 3+ Safer Campuses Campaign, and UNFPA. At this point, I want to welcome the representatives of UNESCO and UNFPA to give very brief remarks and, of course, just let us know what the expectations are in this live town hall discussion on gender-based violence.
Naam, shukran sana Anki Doris. Mimi nitakuwa na fursa ya kumuita Irene Wangoi kutoka UNFPA kuzungumzia masuala haya, alafu yeye pia atampatia Jen Kamau.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm very delighted to be here with you and to join so many people who are as committed as we are to ending gender-based violence, which is one of the greatest human rights violations that we are facing. And we said today's Human Rights Day, so this is a very opportune time for us to be discussing this very critical issue. UNFPA is the UN Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, and we work to ensure that everyone, all people, have the opportunity to fulfill their potential, and especially women, girls, and young people. The people who are seated in this room here today, the youth, you are a core part of UNFPA's mandate and why we exist, to make sure that you can live a life free from violence in all its forms and everywhere where it occurs. And that also includes in online spaces. I know all of you are so active on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, in the digital platforms. You use online platforms to learn, to connect with friends. And I just wanted to tell you that the virtual is real and online violence is real, especially for women and girls who are very much more exposed to this form of violence. We want to tell you that there is a solution and that you should not be quiet, because it's not causing you physical injury. It doesn't mean that it doesn't cause you harm. And so we hope that today we can work together to come up with solutions to create safer campuses and safer learning institutions for all of us. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Shukran sana. Huyo ni Irene Wangoi kutoka UNFPA. Nataka nimwalike Jen kutoka UNESCO, afisa wa UNESCO. Karibu.
Thank you and good evening everyone.
Good evening.
As my colleague said, I'm also very excited for this opportunity that we have to talk about safer campuses. As UNESCO, we have a project that we are implementing. It's called Our Rights, Our Lives, Our Future. And it is within this project that we are having a Safer Campuses campaign that is being implemented across 6 countries in Africa, because we are saying that we want to stop, to ensure that we have safer campuses for our learners to achieve their educational potential. It is unacceptable when we have even children, even in this country, where you have children as young as 13 years becoming mothers. We have high incidences of femicide that we have seen. And for us, what we are doing is that we are working with the University of Nairobi and we are working with the Kenya Medical Training College to ensure that there are safer campuses by establishing the gender desk where they can seek help. We have gender wellness, and we are also doing a lot of creating awareness and action. And we are very excited to see that today, as we mark the last day of the 16 days. For us, it is not the last day, but also this work continues because we have to ensure that we have safer campuses. And for young people who are here, as much as we are talking of safer campuses for girls and women, we are also telling the young men, it is okay not to be okay. Please seek help when you have challenges. Thank you, and we look forward to a very exciting discussion. Thank you.
Shukran sana. Huyo ni msimamizi ambaye pia ni afisa kutoka UNESCO. Anki Doris, umesikia, si wasichana peke yake, pia wavulana wameambiwa wajitokeze wapaze sauti zao. Je, jopo lako linasemaje? Manake naona una jopo lililoshiba. Chuo cha Nairobi kiko hapo, pia chuo cha KMTC kiko hapo na pia wengine wako hapo kuyazungumzia haya. Chukua uskani.
Asante sana, Yeri. I want to appreciate all the partners in the room. And of course, just to get the conversation going, we're now back on this podium with the panelists with me. We want to get into the conversation, a very engaging conversation. But I'm reminded the words of Isaac Asimov, who said, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. All right? And remember that in South Africa, because there's something that is rising in South Africa as well, the southern of the continent, and a pandemic within a pandemic has been exposed. These were the words of Gracia Machel when she was speaking in 2020. South Africa's police commissioner, Becky Cele, had confirmed that there were very many rising cases of GBV in South Africa at that time. In fact, these remarks forced the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, then to dub that particular issue of gender-based violence in South Africa as a second pandemic. That's how serious it can go. Now, we want to just get into the conversation with the panelists right here with me. And even as I mentioned their names, I will encourage the audience to just give a round of applause to acknowledge them for being intentionally here. I want to appreciate the UON representative, Professor Walter Jaoko, who is the director, CAVI, Institute of Clinical Research, University of Nairobi. Let's appreciate him. Asante Sanada. I'm also here with a student leader. It's very important that we hear your voice. Thank you for coming. Esther Gitaranga from the University of Nairobi. Esther, karibu sana. And he's hosting us, so allow me to again appreciate the KMTC representative, who is their own CEO, Dr. Kelly Oluoch, PhD, Chief Executive Officer, Kenya Medical Training College. Thank you very much for creating time. And Miss Alberta could be last but not least. Miss Alberta Wambua, Executive Director, Gender Violence Recovery Center of the Nairobi Women's Hospital. Let's appreciate Alberta. Panelists, we appreciate you. But again, we're going to keep our remarks very, detailed, but very short. I'll start with, of course, the students, because it's your day. Hearing your remarks, very, very important. You'll set the pace for all of us in the room. My major question today would be, you interact with the students. This is your world now. What are the, main forms of GBV or gender-based violence that the students today are dealing with? What are they? Which ones can you say are majorly occurring in your midst? Welcome.
Comrades power. Comrades power. It sounds very illegal not to say that when you're talking to comrades. I think it is important that I mention I am the immediate former president of all female students at the University of Nairobi. And I think that is important because, thank you, it informs where I am coming from. I directly interact with these issues, and a lot of them are happening. The problem is insecurity of, if I tell Gitaranga, at the end of the day, she's no lawyer, she's no police, what is she going to do? So the main forms of gender-based violence are sexual gender-based violence, physical gender-based violence, and the online gender-based violence. Especially online, it is taken as if it is part of life, especially to those vocal student leaders, the vocal girls who want to speak their mind and be seen and be heard. It is seen as if for you to be harassed is an initiation process. It's like if you can't take the insults, if you can't take the harassment, then you're not fit for leadership. You're not fit to be aggressive in whatever field you're doing. The other thing that is happening with physical violence, it is happening because of understanding perpetrators. At the end of the day, there is a lot of nilibuy food na nikabuy drinks, halafu unaninyima, At the end of the day, it is not the perpetrator who is at fault in this case. It is the female, because why did you eat and drink and then not consent? Food and drink is not consent.
So are you talking about, sorry to interject, victim blaming?
Yes.
Blaming the victim?
Yes.
Okay.
It is happening a lot, and that is why it is continuing every day. That girls no longer have the right to say no to men or even to fellow ladies. Girls no longer have the right to set standards for the type of people that they want to give sexual consent to. And it is very sad because it is a conversation we keep repeating every day. And sometimes I ask myself, to the gentlemen, how hard is it to approach a lady? I mean, come on. You can do this without beating up a lady. When she says no and you push her all over and you insult her, it is so wrong.
All right.
Yeah, when she comes to visit your hostel, that does not mean she has come there for sex. When you see her with condoms in her handbag or in her room, that is not to say that she's prepared to have sex anytime. So we need to understand this conversation, that consent means she has to say the words yes, or he has to say the words yes for you to know it is consent.
All right.
So it is happening a lot, and sadly, a lot of us are afraid to report because we do not know what will be done at the end of the day. And let me just say to the school administration, to the bodies that are here, to the police, stop forcing victims to solve these cases out of court. Stop telling ladies and girls, simuongee hii maneno ishe. Stop telling them, he is your boyfriend, you've been together for 8 months. This is a small misunderstanding. Stop telling them that he can compensate you and cater for your medical bills. I mean, a crime is a crime. It needs to be handled as a crime, and it does not matter who the perpetrator is, whether it is a student leader, whether it is a school staff, whoever it is. Let them be treated as the criminal that they are.
All right.
Thank you.
Let us appreciate her. Very powerful. Because I will come back to you, Esther, in as far as challenges, reporting challenges are concerned. You just touched a bit on it, and also how these particular students you're referring to can become allies in combating the gender-based violence, because it is within the institution. But allow me to hear from of course, the Chief Executive Officer, KMTC, Dr. Kelly Oluoch, because Nairobi University, of course, is an institution of higher learning, but we want to go deeper into the higher institutions, that is TVET, tertiary education institutions. Now, perhaps you could bring us up to speed on how this gender-based violence manifests itself in the higher institutions, that is tertiary education institutions.
Thank you so much. About 90% of people report having experienced gender-based violence in one way or another. Majorly, technology instigated gender-based violence, as the student leader is talking about here. And in college, about 40% of the population of students report actually having experienced gender-based violence. And out of them, 68% of them tend to be women or ladies. Now, how does it present in our cases? Majorly, it starts by poor performance, academic performance. There is withdrawal or mental disturbance of the victim. Some cases, they present with physical features like marks, body marks that show that there has been physical violence. And sometimes, basically, withdrawal of the individual that probably could speak to cases of being afraid to report, the way our student leader is talking about here, where we have challenges of stigma about reporting gender-based violence. Now, academic institutions like ours need to be very sensitive, and our lecturers need to be very sensitive to realize that this is, as you're saying, a pandemic. And there is no one who owns the right to inflict harm to any other person. And as an institution, we call out this vice and we say it is not acceptable to have gender-based violence, and our students need to learn in an environment that is safe. So we are talking about safe campuses in the O3+. And here we are saying that we need to have a safe environment for reporting, and we need to have measures in place for those who become victims of gender-based violence. And those measures must be youth-friendly so that it encourages reporting, it encourages health-seeking behavior like counseling, and it encourages a situation where victims get mental support, a psychological support, a medical attention, and at the same time, it enables them to get back to their feet and continue with studies. Because actually, in the worst case scenario, it could lead to suicide tendency among victims. And what we do not want is to see a case of a student losing their lives because of gender-based violence. What we are saying here is just even one casualty of gender-based violence is one too many. And we must stop this right on its track. Thank you.
Right, let's appreciate him. In fact, the CEO here has reminded me the slogans that we all use, and sometimes you question if you use it just because it's trending or you really mean it. I don't know if this is familiar. Even if you're watching from back at home, you've once in a while said, break the cycle of violence, break the silence, know your rights. Everybody says that, know your rights. Of course, you're looking at do not look away. People are talking about hashtag stop the violence, act against abuse. But what are you actually doing? What is the action? Because we're bringing call for action here tonight. I want to appreciate Miss Alberta, because I should have started with you, but I started with the student and, of course, the CEO intentionally, because someone watching from back at home is not trying to find where they are. There's so many definitions of gender-based violence. People Google every time. Now we have people who are self-proclaimed experts. But we are very glad to have you here. You're the Executive Director, Gender Violence Recovery Center of the Nairobi Women's Hospital. So I want to go back to that layman's question. What exactly are we talking about? Gender-based violence, and what types of gender-based violence are really there so that we are now at par?
Thank you for having me in the show. Good evening. So gender-based violence is any violence perpetrated on you because of your gender, and it can happen both in public and private spaces. And it takes different forms, as you mentioned. So one, there's sexual violence. The student leader spoke to sexual violence. And to also insist that gender-based violence can happen to either gender, both male and female. Where I work, it happens, the people who report, the survivors who report gender-based violence are both male and female, though a higher percentage is female. So sexual violence is one of the forms of violence. We also have physical violence. We've also alluded to it. And she also spoke about the beating, being pushed left and right, the slapping, the kicking, all that. We also have emotional violence, psychological violence. So an example would be insults. For example, you're being insulted, you're being, your self-esteem is being, drained and things like that. We also have economic violence. So for example, you're being told by your partner not to go to work, or when you do, the resources or the money, the salary that you get is also controlled. You have no control over it. I'd also like to mention that there's also harmful practices. So for example, female genital mutilation or circumcision, wife inheritance. We also have femicide. We spoke about femicide for a long time in this country, especially this year. And femicide takes different forms. So for example, in this country, there are areas where old women may be killed because they are perceived to be witches. That's femicide, yeah? So it's not just the killing of students. We've also talked about technologically facilitated gender-based violence. We've also alluded to that. And that's using technology to perpetrate violence. So for example, cyberbullying, someone spoke about cyberbullying, one student. There's also sharing, for example, sextortion, sharing sex information without someone's consent. You shouldn't even do that. There's also doxing. The student leader mentioned, in Kenya it happens a lot to female leaders, but also political leaders when they're vying for positions. So those would be the forms of gender-based violence. I'd also like to mention that it happens at whatever age. I've seen unborn babies, pregnant women being beaten, and they lose their children. Where I work, there's been a 3-year-old baby, for example, sexually assaulted. The older woman was 105-year-old. So I'd like to give also clarity that it happens whatever economic situation, whatever spaces you live, and can happen to anyone. Thank you.
And I just want to pick that question up with you again. You've said this can happen to anybody,
Yes.
but even as you experience the cases that come to the center, who is at the highest risk? Who is more vulnerable? I mean, what are you seeing really, even as people walk in and out of the center?
Thank you. So where I work at the Gender Violence Coverage Center, we have an approximate of 4,000 survivors in 1 year, and that's when there's no social disruption, like election, the shadow pandemic around COVID. 90% of these cases would be the female, with 40% being children. 76% of the cases would be sexual violence cases. Now talking about higher institutions of learning, from April 2023 to March 2024, 228 cases were students from higher institutions of learning, and 8 of them actually resulted to pregnancy. Interestingly, about 70% of those cases were actually intimate partner violence cases.
Thank you very much. We needed that data. I want to come very quickly to Professor Walter Jaoko, who's the director at CAVI, that is Institute of Clinical Research, University of Nairobi. Professor, you've been listening, and of course, I know you're following as well. You interact a lot with this young generation. I want to hear in your opinion and experience in the HTEIs, all right, EIs, is there rise? I know there are so many, articles out there, but I want your observation. Is there a rise in the GBV in those particular institutions, Professor?
Okay, thank you.
And data.
Yeah, thank you very much first of all, for inviting me to this panel. Yeah, definitely there is a rise. And what you see in the newspapers is a reflection of what is happening in the country. And so even within the campuses, what you see happening in the country translates to what is happening within the campuses. And you've already alluded to a project called O3 Plus at University of Nairobi, funded by UNESCO. It's the reality that students within campuses need assistance. The O3 Plus, as we know, stands for our rights, our lives, and our future. And gender-based violence is one of the main obstacles to students achieving their rights, their lives, and their future. And so it is a very important conversation to have. The common denominator in gender-based violence is silence. And as you've heard all the panelists talk about it, is that the silence could be from the victim, him or herself, but there's also a big silence within society. You are told not to talk about it. There is stigma forcing people to go silent. So in this campaign, what we would like to appeal to people is to break the silence and to be advocates of speaking out against gender-based violence. It is on the rise, but we can make a downturn in this prevalence.
Professor, I know you've spoken about the silence, but are there other things that you can attribute this rise to? Are there other things that you can attribute this particular rise to, besides people just being silent about it? What other things can there be?
Silence perpetrates it, but the genesis of gender-based violence are multifactorial.
All right.
Stresses in life, in this country, there is no doubt that the stress levels have really gone up. Economic pressure, political, somebody talked about, political violence. During political turmoil, you then experience more of gender-based violence. So it is a lot of it is multifactorial, and it is hard to place your finger and say this is what has caused it. And sometimes it is used as an excuse. Really, there should be no reason to meet gender-based violence. So our urge is speak about it. Let the community, let the society also be aware of it. Sometimes the victims are actually not aware that this is a crime. And that is why for the O3 Plus, the first O is actually all right. If people can know that what is being done to them is unlawful and speak about it, we'll have gone a long way.
And I like when he said there is no excuse. You know, we see on social media some people with profile pictures or without profile pictures saying, "Kwani yalivaje? Kwani yeye alimfanyia nini?" These are what people use to pretty much justify gender-based violence. But Professor says, speak up, and there is no excuse whatsoever to be a perpetrator of gender-based violence. I want to go back to Esther. Esther, you said earlier on that it is important that when these reports are made, they're taken with the seriousness they deserve. So what are the challenges, really, if you now break it down for us? Because all the students would want to know that they're safe to report somewhere, to a gender desk, perhaps to the police, perhaps, even if you're watching back at home. Shouldn't it be safe for you to report an incident? Esther, what is the challenge for you young people right now, and as far as reporting is concerned?
I see my school administration here. Please do not beat me after this, but let me just say it as it is. It is happening a lot that some of the people who are actually perpetrators are student leaders or the popular group in school. So when you get a case in school, you're supposed to report to the security at the hostels, because that is mainly where it happens. The moment you report to the hostels, and these people are known by this person, they will go and try to talk these issues behind closed doors. At the end of the day, this victim will be told, how can you say that he raped you, yet he is your boyfriend? It means there's an automatic consent if you're in an intimate relationship. So the cases are not really taken seriously. Most of them do not even get to the legal action, and I'm sure even for them, they might not know that it's happening because the reporting does not actually get to their desks.
Let me interject a bit. So this is something that is known to you. So I'm believing quite a number of students within the institution are aware. No wonder the silence. How, and because they're listening back at home as well, and the students here, how then can students be part of, breaking that cycle and making it louder for your administration, as you say, to take it seriously? What do you think would be their role to play in combating, first, GBV, and secondly, this barrier between reporting and the authorities?
I think the first thing is to stop protecting these people. These people are our friends, these people are our brothers, these people are our classmates. And you're looking at your friend and you're in a situation where if you report, this guy might be expelled, this guy might be suspended, this person might be in prison, and you try to talk the victim out of it in the name of pia wewe kuwa human kidogo. Sasa akishakuwa expelled, unataka kuharibia mtoto wa mtu maisha for good. So at the end of the day, we are the people who are helping these perpetrators to continue these things, because you try to push this thing, but then there is a very big crowd behind this person who is saying, it happened once, I promise it will not happen again. But it ends up happening to one person and another one. And this one victim who did not get assistance, their first information, if they hear of another case, they will say, don't even report, because you won't get any help. And then at the end of the day, they try to make you feel like if they go to prison, what will you have benefited? Your benefit there is that it will not happen to your sister, it will not happen to any other student. So kindly, let us speak up. Let us not be afraid to talk. And if at this level you do not get help, just know there is always a higher level where you can report. You can go directly to the Dean of Students. If you feel that is not being worked on, please go to the police. If they are not responsive, please go to FIDA. Please do not keep quiet. Do not give up because you've met one obstacle. But please, let us stop protecting these people.
Let us stop. I think that deserves a clap. I did that because we only have 5 minutes to conclude, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to hear from, of course, Daktari Oluoch, because then the question would be, how can institutions reach these younger people? You see, generations have changed. How you talk to these people has changed. We're talking to a generation that needs to be convinced at some point that you're really for them and you're not just playing games for that. And I'm curious to understand how the administrations she's referring to, all right, and you at the top can ensure that we're really reaching these young people with this information. And very briefly. And I mean institutions of higher learning, the tertiary, the universities. We believe your voice will represent them.
Thank you. As institution leadership, the buck stops at us. And this means that we should create environments that foster safe existence among the stakeholders who coexist in that environment. In Kenya Medical Training College, we do a lot. First is partnerships. For example, now we have partnerships with UNFPA and UNESCO to be able to promote awareness. Awareness, having information is very important and key so that you're able to identify, you're able to communicate, and you are able to know what actions to take in cases where you are violated. Second is to mechanisms to correct the wrong. The first mechanism is to make sure there are enabling policies in place, like sexual harassment policy, gender-based violence policies in place, the human resource policies that are in place that enable action to be taken against perpetrators. And we also have in our case what is that elaborates what is not acceptable within the institution and what needs to be done. Again, there must be environment that creates interventions that are effective. And those interventions could include a youth-friendly environment.
Right.
And that means that be enabled in terms and promote peer counseling, and you can enable perpetrators to be exposed and an environment where they can report victimized without people ganging against them. And then we also need to have situations where actions are followed to ensure that effectiveness is there to bring victims justice in cases where we have those challenges.
Well, thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge that we started with this panel a bit late, but I don't know what Yeri has to say. We're taking a very short breather for those who are watching back at home. Yeri is here with me for the Kiswahili. Yeri?
Naam, bila shaka Anki, kama ulivyosikia jopo limezungumzia mengi. Kutozungumza ni moja ya zile kauli ambazo zimetajwa pakubwa, kwamba wengi ambao wanapitia madhila haya hawasemi, wananyamaza na hawataki kufika mbele kuweza kuyazungumzia, ikiwa ni wito kwamba watu wajitokeze na kuyazungumzia yale madhila na kadhia ambazo wanazipitia kupitia kwa wale ambao wanatekeleza maovu hayo. Na nataka nichukue mwanafunzi mmoja hapa nisikie kauli yake kwa dakika moja hivi kabla tuende kwenye mapumziko mafupi kabla ya kurudi kuzungumzia masuala mengine. Nisikie kauli yako ni ipi kuhusiana na yale ambayo yamezungumzwa pale mbele. Unaweza zungumza kwa Kiingereza.
Good evening, everyone. I thank you for this opportunity. My name is Brenda Onyango. I'm from Kenya Medical Training College. And what I want to say about GBV is like what the changes that we students want to see when addressing GBV on campuses. And the first change, we want improved reporting mechanism within the campuses. And first, we want to thank the UNESCO, UNFPA, in partnership also with our administration, Kenya Medical Training College, for giving us the gender desk here at KMTC and in the UON too. But now we want to ask, the gender desk is always open during the working hours. So we want to ask if it should be open during off hours too. Suppose something happened to any student in the hostel during the weekends or the off hours like night hours, what is the first measure that student will take towards reporting what has happened to him or her? The second thing, is dedicated trained personnel to handle GBV cases sensitively and confidentially. We want those trained personnel to be there to handle these cases confidentially and in a sensitive way, because most of our students, they are afraid to seek these solutions. Why? Because they say if we go there and share our problems with those people, it will just be like accelerating the problem. And then another thing is to create awareness and education within our campuses.
All right.
Not only in KMTC here at Nairobi and UN. We want this education and awareness to be created all over the country to other KMTCs and other universities outside there, because youths are also outside there and they need this awareness. And then the third thing is equity. If we look on this, we found that in situations like this platform that we are in right now, if you look at people who are here, the female are much more than the male students. Because male students, they feel like they have been withdrawn from this. You heard people talking about female, neglecting male outside. And at the end of the day, it is these male that have been neglected outside. At the end of the day, it is these males that have been neglected outside. We are ending up to meet with them to create life partners. You see, they have been neglected out. You see, like mwanaume atajitegemea, acha nishughulikie mtoto wangu msichana, and they're growing up with that stigma and mental health. And then at the end, you will find the physical abuse. You will ask yourself, where is this physical abuse coming from? It is because of the stigma these males have grown with. The last thing I want to say, we have to treat the cause than the symptoms.
Last thing.
Yes.
Okay.
We have to treat the cause than the symptoms. What is the main cause of this GBV? You will find our female. The main cause is they are trying to find a way to provide for themselves. Lack of school fees, even the way to sustain themselves because of the humble backgrounds we have there back at home. So they will try to give themselves to these men. So what is the prevention? I would like to ask to bring the supportive forms for these students, like school fees. Even if you can give them the loan, they will borrow the loan, pay the school fees, and pay back, like the HELB is doing.
All right.
Thank you.
Asante sana, amezungumza kwa ufasaha mkubwa sana kama daktari vile ama kama tabibu, akizungumzia kwamba lazima tujue shida na kile ambacho tunaweza kutoa tiba yake. Nataka nirudi kwake tu Anki aweze kuwashukuru wageni wetu.
That was very powerful. I'm doing this very briefly, and I want to apologize because there are certain very tough questions we didn't ask, including how the survivors can access comprehensive support and the steps that survivors need to take in seeking justice. But Alberta is here, and I want to encourage you all to take a number to make sure that the conversation continues. If I get a chance, I'll bring you back. So let's just give a round of applause for my panelists. Miss Alberta Wambua, thank you for creating time. Professor Walter Jaoko, thank you so much for creating time. I also want to appreciate our host today, Dr. Kelly Oluoch, for creating time. And Power, Esther Gitaranga, student leader, University of Nairobi. Let us appreciate them. The conversation continues. If you're watching from back at home, I hope it's exciting. Remember, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence comes to an end today, starts on 25th of November, but we were hoping it could run for 365 days a year. Remember, it's also the Human Rights Day. Do not miss the conversation. The second panelists come in after this break. Thank you very much for joining us on KTN. I know that's your favorite channel. We give you not only entertainment, but very constructive conversations, just as this one tonight, right here at KMTC, but of course in unison with very different but helpful partners. I want to appreciate UNESCO, University of Nairobi, 3+ UNFPA, KMTC, where we are, Safer Campuses campaign. In fact, just to bring you up to speed why this conversation is timely, we are just concluding the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence that begin on the 25th of November and end today, the 10th of December. What is also even more powerful is that today is the Human Rights Day. My big question would be, which of your rights do you know? If I woke you up right now and this is your life or death, do you know your rights as a human being? Not man or woman? Big question. To my audience today, we appreciate you. Please give a round of applause to yourself. Now, this particular discussion is sponsored by the United Nations Population Fund and UNESCO. We had our first panel conversation on what exactly is gender-based violence, how does it manifest, what are the forms, how is it affecting these young people in the higher institutions of learning, and we've had very intriguing responses to these questions. In fact, we have survivors in the room. But we want to go deeper in introducing a new form of violence. I could call it a silent one, but yet so loud. And this is that particular form of violence which is happening now in our online spaces. It is facilitated by something that came to help us. I mean, the globe is going digital. Technology was supposed to be constructive. How did the perpetrators find their way into the same space and now are causing this new form of violence? Let me appreciate the panelists who are going to, of course, probably wave, say something, but I'll need you guys to applaud them as I introduce them. I want to appreciate, of course, Julie Difu, who's a Program Officer, Coalition on Violence Against Women. Julie, thank you for creating time. I'm also here with another very powerful student leader, Diana Nekesa. All right. Campus Me Too movement leader, JKU at. In fact, I'm very curious about the Campus Me Too. Let's appreciate you once again. Thank you for creating time. Last but not least, I'm here with Masheti Masinjila, who is the Executive Director, Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. Daktari, thank you for creating time. And as is the norm today, okay, not the norm all the days, I want to start with the student leader because we are trying to reach the young people. So it is very important that I begin with Diana Nekesa. And online harassment, you know, people might say it as a joke, something you throw in the air. You know, I was bullied here, they said I'm too skinny, or somebody actually DM'd me, someone took up my nudes all over, and I'm affected at some point somehow. People laugh at it. I mean, most people find it not very serious. In fact, you're told either you need to grow up or, you know, don't take it too seriously. But I'm curious because hearing from a young person who interacts with the students as a leader, what is really the impact, all right, of this online harassment on you young people and especially students at this point? Welcome, Nekesa.
Thank you so much. So the impact of online harassment, I'll first of all start by mentioning the types of online harassment.
Yes.
We have doxing. Doxing is where someone shares your contact or your information without your consent. We have someone shares nodes with you without your consent. Mm-hmm. We have someone share impersonation. We have maybe someone trying to ruin your image and your name somewhere. Yeah, so we have different forms of online harassment, and from the impacts, I will start with the first. I think it's a notorious impact that I've seen. Mm-hmm. Self-esteem. It really tempers with your self-esteem, because now you can imagine someone has impersonated you, or some photos of you have been shared online without your consent. Now you open your phone, you find yourself trending everywhere. So now you see it will lower your self-esteem, or someone has trolled you online. This is mostly seen during election where there are always the online banters, and I know you can relate, the young people in universities, online banters in the WhatsApp groups, right? So like it lowers your self-esteem. And also when it comes to academics, it can reduce your focus because you're trying to think of other things, of how you are trolled somewhere, of how your photo is trending, and now your focus will not be as high as it was. There's also the part of the conflict it brings with your friends, with your families. Let's say your parents have seen your photos are trending somewhere. They brought you to school to study, but now, according to them, you will have gone to do some other things. And now you have parents like mine who will say, I'm not paying your fees. I didn't take you to school to do this. So now there's that conflict that you'll have with your parents. So those are some of the notorious impacts of online harassment. We also have depression. You find some people actually go into depression. We have the mental impact, the stigma, the depression. So online harassment is so critical, as much as it's so silent, and it can really take a toll on your mental health.
I hear something, though maybe you could answer it very briefly. It's a word I've heard around, catfishing. Is it where they use your photo and you do not know somebody's using your photo? Also, I think it came with the Gen Zs. Kusalimia mtu kidogo. Is this part of it? Because if that is it, then I think we need to talk to the young people as well.
Kusalimia mtu, you're actually, first of all, you're sharing the contacts of that person without their consent. Let's start from there. That's harassment because they have not consented to you sharing their information. So yes, it is online harassment.
All right.
So young people, you need to work on that.
All right, so we're getting somewhere. I want to also hear very, very quickly from now, Masheti Masinjila, who is the Executive Director, Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. It's something I've said is new, but how prevalent is it? How prevalent is online violence?
Thank you. The data that the CEO shared here is the same also for tech-facilitated GBV. About 40%, like from the latest figures in research, it averages 40% of, for instance, in the institution of tertiary institutions in Kenya, is 40% have experienced. Out of those 40%, about 64% are ladies within those institutions. But generally, it varies from 40 to 60%. So it's a very high prevalence. Yeah.
This is in as far as the online spaces are concerned. Dr. Are you trying to say what we have seen in as far as the general violence, gender-based violence, falls in the same category of online violence?
Online violence is a mirror of the other forms of GBV out there.
All right.
The online space is a facilitator. And the curious thing about the data that is available is that they speak to each other, because the same people who perpetrate the other forms of violence out there are also the same who perpetrate it on the online. The only big difference now is that you have most of the online kind of violence, tech-facilitated GBV, being done by younger people. So the younger you are, the more and you have access to this, to the online space and the other technologies that facilitate participation on the online, the more likely that you are a bully or you are a victim of this.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to you in as far as creating, safer spaces, but I want to hear from Julie Difu, who is the Program Officer, Coalition on Violence Against Women. It's something we can't run away from. You're on social media, I'm on social media, we are all on social media. So the question would be then, how does, the online GBV impact, today's Human Rights Day, but then this online violence then impacts on some of our rights, like I think our rights to expression. I do not know if I'm correct, you're the expert here, but what are these of this this new trend online?
Okay, thank you. First, to acknowledge that the Constitution already provides, or it gives the right to expression. That is Article 33 of the Constitution. However, with rights, not all rights are absolute. So we have a limitation that are some factors that limit this right to expression. And that is, for example, if, for example, you infringe on another person's right, propagate war, incite others, those are some of the conditions that can limit the right to expression. So when this right is abused, when the right to expression is abused, as the earlier panelist had alluded to, then it creates an environment whereby people are working under pressure and people are scared to express themselves. And in relation to what has been alluded to earlier, women in politics and public life, according to the study that we conducted together with our partners, we discovered that actually women in politics and public life are highly impacted from this type of violence. And basically, how it manifests is through gender disinformation. You know, talks like women cannot hold leadership positions and so forth, disinformation, misinformation. So when it comes to that and the causes that relate to this, people become scared to voice out their opinions in public for the fear of being judged, for the fear of being victimized. So in terms of civic spaces, it affects participation of women into the civic spaces, whereby now the result of it is that basically affects the democracy and the right to participate in political elections and so forth. Right. And we have seen this especially in the 2022 election and previous elections, where women have been attacked who are in leadership. And not only women, as she has said, even if you're running for a seat within the universities, those are the survivors and victims of online violence. So we have this phenomenon that is comes out of that, which is called the chilling effect, that when you face these types of violence, then you withdraw from participation. Right. Then that is what we call the chilling effect of it.
And then you've given us another word there, chilling effect. But I want to come to our student leader here, Dana. You do, there's a movement here, Campus Me Too platform, and you've said that the young people need to come out strongly and collaborate. But what do you do with this platform to raise awareness? Because that's what 16 Days of Activism is about, but also breaking the silence. So what do you do as a leader in that movement? And how can all these people come in and those watching tonight?
Okay, so Campus Me Too is a movement that fights to end sexual harassment from staff in higher learning institutions. I will start first. I will first
Remember
start
to
with
keep it very detailed.
Our highlights. Sorry, with our highlights, so that you get a glimpse of what we do, and I'll share more. So, in 2019, December 9th, over 11,000 students signed a petition in support of our 5 demands, and it was presented to Mr. Charles, the Deputy Director, Directorate of Higher Education, and the Ministry of Education. Then in 3rd February 2021, the Ministry of Education gave a directive to the institutions to actually adapt and implement our demands. So what we do a lot of social media engagement. We have had a lot of inter-universities dialogue just to give awareness. Just to give awareness, as I've stated, we also have a lot of resources in our social media platforms, Campus Me Too, in our Facebook platforms, Instagram, and also Twitter. And also we have a lot of resources in campusme2.com. You can just go get a lot of our resources. And also Maseno University has a lot of our resources in their university website. So I can say that we do a lot of empowerment, of advocacy, both
right.
online and physical. Sorry for taking
That is okay. Thank you very much. We only have 3 minutes to go back to the audience, and I want to just hear from Julie in as far as how the technology companies can create safer spaces. I know I'll come back to of course, Masheti here on that same question, and as far as institutions are concerned. So what do you think technology companies could do or should do to create safer environments?
One is content moderation. They should be able to detect and filter online violence even before it happens. As Coalition on Violence Against Women as well, we are working on developing a lexicon, which is like a dictionary of terms which are abusive. And that is what we are proposing as well for the tech companies to adopt, to use that tool in order to filter some of these online offenses. And then secondly is to work with the stakeholders. This is not a one-man show. There are different players in this field. And just to mention the Communications Authority of Kenya, the DCI, ODPP, and all that. So it is working closely with these stakeholders in order to flag or report some of these cases, and also to comply with the investigation, because sometimes the stakeholders request for information which they withhold.
Right.
And then lastly is to educate the public on security.
Thank you very much. Let me hear from Masheti on that same question.
It's just been quite detailed. I'll use a different language. I think tech companies should be compelled to abide by certain minimum standards of safety, particularly with specific reference to TFGBV. And also, for instance, one of the fastest rising online kind of abuse is for child abuse is now at 30% average. And this is something that companies, if they are serious, they could be able to ensure that it doesn't happen. So for me, it's about the law, policies, and also the monitoring to ensure that they keep to certain minimum standards of safety that are going to be to protect everybody.
And the word that Masheti has said is people ought to be serious. Seriousness from those companies. They need to be compelled. I remember going through my Twitter. I'm told to filter some words that might harass me. I don't know how many of you know that. You can actually filter. Okay, I don't know if I'm alone. There's an audience here with us, and I want to appreciate my panelists. But before I give you the round of applause, I just want to go to Yeri for the audience interactions, perhaps some comments. So Yeri Suleiman, nakupa makofi na nakupa mikrofoni.
Asante sana Anki. Niko hapa katika upande huu kupokea maoni kutoka kwa wanafunzi ambao wako hapa. Nataka nichukue maoni ya mwanafunzi mmoja hapa.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay, I'm David Mereo, student in KMTC Nairobi, taking orthopedics trauma medicine. And I have a question, or rather, it's more of a clarification, that what mechanisms will be put in place to hold duty bearers accountable for failing to address GBV cases?
Bila shaka, naona swali hilo limeweza kusikika. Wacha nichukue swali moja hapa. Songa hivi karibu, kuja hivi karibu. Njoo hivi karibu. Na swali lako ni lipi kwa ufupi?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My question is, at times, let's say in the society, maybe a lady is raped. Okay, maybe the lady was dressing, you know, when the technology is advancing, also ladies tend to advance in their dressing. Yeah, the lady maybe has been raped. The lady decides to keep silent or to keep that rape a secret. At the end of the day, the society will still point the finger at her. And pointing fingers at maybe a lady, it may make her to be depressed rather than coming up to say. A situation like that, how can we deal with it?
Dada anapoamua my dress, my choice, Anki. inakuwa vipi? Manake hilo ndio swala dada ameulizia. Manake wengine wanajipata kwamba wana unyanyapaa, depression, kwamba hawezi kuzungumza, wakiogopea stigma. Ni baadhi ya masuala ambayo yameibuliwa hapa na wanafunzi hawa. Sijui jopo lako linasemaje kuhusiana na masuala haya.
Acha pangine nisikize from the experts, because unajua nikipiga picha yangu mimi nikaiposti, my favorite swimming suit, so as you expect, pengine I'll be trolled about it. That lady's question, I don't know if Julie, you can respond to that, and we can also hear from the student in just 30 seconds, please.
I think she has asked a question about victimization and re-victimization by stakeholders or service providers when seeking help. And I think what is important to us and what we've been trying to do is to create awareness or capacity build those who are handling some of these cases, including the police officers, the prosecutors, in how to effectively handle not only gender-based violence, but also tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And we are using the model of trauma-informed care and survivor-centeredness. And what basically this means is understanding the needs and wants of the client, and not placing them in a situation whereby they feel like they are the cause to the gender-based violence or whatever they are facing. So I think sensitizing key stakeholders who are handling these cases is very key in ensuring that survivors of gender-based violence are not re-victimized or face secondary trauma.
All right, let me hear from Nakasa.
Okay, so one thing Campus Me Too we have been doing, first of all, to train the students, to train them to understand that victim blaming should not even be among the priority when someone has been harassed. We have been doing collaborative efforts with organizations like ActionAid, UN Women, because there is power in numbers, the collaborative efforts, to just bring together students, to just see how we can educate them, we can create awareness for them to understand. Because I feel like it starts with us. We need to first of all understand that it's so wrong to victim blame, and we should shift the attention to the perpetrators to bring them accountable.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to take only 30 seconds. That has done such a great job. And of course, I'll start with the student in the room, Diana Nekesa, Campus Me Too movement. I want to appreciate Masinjila, who is Executive Director, Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. Thank you, sir. And Julie Difu, I got it right, the Program Officer, Coalition on Violence Against Women. I want to appreciate KTN, Standard Group PLC, for making this possible. Makofia Standard, UNESCO, UNFPA, and all partners, Safer Campuses. We have all of you lined up, 3 pieces, is it? Thank you so much. My name is Anki Dorisombat. Have a good night, and remember, continue to speak out. Yeri Suleiman, unatufungia vipi?
Bila shaka kama ulivyosikia our rights, our lives, our future, ndiyo kauli kuu hapa, kwamba ni haki yako wewe kujitokeza kuweza kuzungumzia yale ambayo ni madhila unawapitia. Usikubali kunyanyaswa, manake ukinyamaza ni kwamba unawapatia wale wanaotekeleza haya kuendelea na madhila yao. Jitokeze, zungumza, paza sauti yako, usikae kimya. Ukiamua my dress, my choice, wewe vaa tu nguo ile unayoona iko sawa na wewe, kwa sababu ni haki yako kuvaa kile unachokitaka. Kutoka hapa KMTC Nairobi, mimi sina la ziada ila kuwashukuru wote hawa ambao wamekuja hapa kuweza kuchangia mjadala huu ambao ni mjadala pevu. Leo ikiwa siku ya mwisho, si ya mwisho, bado tunaweza kuyazungumzia masuala haya kokote pale. Ukiwa umekwazwa, basi jitokeze uweze kuzungumza. Mimi nikurudishie kule studioni ambako wenzangu Ashley Mazuri na Jesse Rogers wako tayari kukuletea taarifa za leo.